Welcome to the Skoll World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship, coming to you live from Oxford, England. And we're talking this morning about tackling we're talking about social entrepreneurship and impact in the Andean region of Latin America. And I'm very privileged to have as a guest Michelle Arevalo-Carpenter. And you are a social entrepreneur and a human rights lawyer. It's a dual focus. You help refugees who are seeking asylum and also help social innovation leaders find the resources and community so that they can affect change more efficiently and at a greater scale. You're also CEO of IMPAQTO, which is the first social innovation accelerator, and also it's a network, a co-working space in Ecuador and beyond. And perhaps I should just ask you to explain just now, while I'm still introducing you, what is an innovation accelerator?
Oh, that's a good question. So our job is, I like to say that our job is to make people feel less lonely. When we started Impacto, we realized that there's all these amazing young change makers that wanted to make a change. So if they were by accident in California, they would have an incredible ecosystem of people in Silicon Valley and San Francisco and universities and governments that believe in them. But if you are in Ecuador and you want to make a change, you would have found yourself in a situation where really there are not many options. You would feel like the only way to make a change was maybe join a political party. So that's why we started Impacto, so that we can, on the one hand, offer change makers a place to call home. So we have this network of co-working spaces in different neighborhoods, but at the same time, help them take that big leap along with the community, but along with this like school for social enterprises, which is this social business accelerator. And
can you give me a sense of the type of entrepreneurs who are working with you in this space together?
Yeah, I mean, we have all kinds of change makers. We found, for example, the founders of Waikana. It's this company that discovered, well, not really discovered, but found that indigenous people in the Amazon jungle in Ecuador drink this beautiful guayusa tea.
What is
guayusa.
Okay.
It's a type of tea that has been found to have 4 times the caffeine as a cup of coffee,
wow,
but also many times the antioxidants of green tea. And the indigenous people use it to focus and to hunt.
Sounds pretty intense.
Yeah,
do you drink it?
Yes, I drink it all the time. It's wonderful.
Do you? And you don't find 4 times caffeine of coffee too much?
Well, I mean, you just have to modify quantities. But what is wonderful is that this leaf grows inside the jungle. So you don't have to clear cut to grow it. You actually need the jungle for it to grow. So what they've done is they've packaged it, and they've worked on a few formulas, and now they export it to 18 different countries as an alternative to energy drinks. But the best part of it is that it provides a living for over 250 farmers that now have every incentive to keep the jungle going.
Because you have to have a jungle in order to grow this plant effectively.
Exactly. It won't grow as a farm. It actually needs the shade and all the other leaves and biodiversity that the jungle offers for it to be as potent as it is.
And how important is sustainability and looking about the concerns around climate change in terms of the entrepreneurs who are working with you in your co-working space?
So it's key. It's right now, what we're proposing here really is not just to have this like niche of small co-working spaces with a few change makers. What we envision is that the next generation of business leaders in places like Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, will no longer think of themselves as businesses that are there to just make profit. They have to leave the world a better place after their businesses operate.
And what evidence have you got that your entrepreneurship center is acting as a catalyst for wider business in Ecuador?
Well, we have both anecdotal and more scientifically proven, evidence. As an anecdote, for example, we hosted the first ever Latin American Investment Summit in Quito, in Ecuador, last year. There were people that were so amazed and so inspired, the right people that saw that this is a thing and it has a lot of potential. So 6, 7 months later, a new impact investment fund funded by local business leaders,
Wow.
was started. So this is no longer this thing that Europeans, Americans think and fund. This is now finding its local roots. So that's one anecdote. But we also have submitted ourselves and all of our graduates of our accelerator to this open evaluation. And it's a worldwide evaluation of accelerators. And last year we got the first results after 4 years of operation. And it turns out that our graduates have 16% more return on investment than graduates of accelerators anywhere else.
Wow. And these are all social entrepreneur accelerators.
Exactly.
And what do you think is the magic in Ecuador which enables your companies to do so brilliantly?
I think it's a combination of two things. One, of course, sometimes it's luck. We in Ecuador have been lucky enough to be the only country in the region that has not had a recent civil war. And what that means is that it makes for an incredibly networked, very, very rich social fabric.
And a cohesive social
Exactly,
fabric.
in rural areas. So we can very easily produce quinoa, but that quinoa is produced by a co-op that is run by people that are third, fourth generation co-ops. Of course, if you are in a civil war, the first person to go in the rural areas is the co-op leader or the association leader. So we have that luck. But on the other hand, there's this really strange phenomenon that the Andean region has one of the highest indexes of entrepreneurs. People are entrepreneurial by nature. They are not afraid to take risks, and they are always doing like a little bit of a side hustle. So if we combine these two things, we have a really potent, recipe for great change.
What you were just saying now about entrepreneurship and risk-taking being kind of part of the DNA of people, coming from where you're from, and you've written about the fact that your achievements are driven both by luck and a lack of fear. And I'm interested to know more about this in terms of your own personality.
Oh, well, I think that lack of fear is can be, of course, a double-edged sword, right? You can sometimes take silly risks, but
would you teach your kids to have a lack of fear?
Absolutely, I think so. Yes, I think that too many fantastic ideas, too many important changes not just fail to happen because of fear. Most of the population is driven by fear, and I think that if you think about it and flip it over to the other side, the alternative to living through fear is living by love, and the love of something that inspires you, like a larger vision, right? So in that sense, what we do always say to our entrepreneurs is that if you're going to be driven by love, it also has to be the love of the right thing. A lot of entrepreneurs are in love with their solution. They think their solution is the best. But what we say is forget about that. If you are a true change maker, you need to fall in love with the problem. Because if you are in love with this problem, you will do whatever it takes. You will pivot and change your mind
and collaborate
in order to make things happen. And then that makes for a very different ecosystem, right? A community that is driven by different rules.
And how do you help people who are fearful cultivate this strength and this love?
Yeah, I think that a lot of fear is driven by another feeling or emotion that is loneliness. I know that I experienced it myself in my personal life when I first returned to Ecuador 5 years ago. So I had this plan, I had worked with refugees all over the world. I lived in Geneva, in Switzerland. I said, no, I'm moving back to my country. I'm going to start this social enterprise around affordable housing, which is what my grandfather does. So, full circle, I was so excited. And, I couldn't even take 2 steps out of the airplane when I was already getting all these negative, you can't do this. This is not done.
Excuse me.
People don't understand what social enterprise means. And in Latin American countries, polarization is taking hold, much like in other places, like in places like the United States. But one of the things that has been that was really difficult is that people said, okay, social, entrepreneurship, social like socialist, entrepreneurship like capitalist. What are you? and I felt very alone in that middle. And that's why we started Impacto, to solve loneliness. Yeah. Because once you solve loneliness, you feel less fearful. If you're going to take a leap over, and take a huge risk, it's so much easier to take that huge risk just holding hands with other people.
And I loved reading about the fact that you're working with an all-women team to convert this former jazz club in Quito into your space where you're working together. It sounds like it must have a great atmosphere.
Yes, well, I mean, so 5 years down the road, I mean, we started Impacto with like this co-working space, and now we're opening our 4th branch, and this 4th branch, we wanted it to be very special. We wanted to be able to serve the creative economy entrepreneurs in Quito. We find that the creative arts and artists and cultural experts sometimes don't see themselves as entrepreneurs, but they're incredibly entrepreneurial. So we wanted to make sure that there's a space where they would feel free and safe, and then they would feel like they can find other like-minded people, but where we can also bring in, who knows, maybe a banker, which is probably the antithesis of a cultural entrepreneur. But maybe
you want
a banker
synthesis of different disciplines, of lawyers, of bankers, of creative change makers, in order to take the best of their ideas and come up with more innovative solutions, because we know that cross-disciplinary thinking helps really tackle different. Now, I think it's time now to do a drawing, and I want to draw a kind of theme idea of your co-working space, really being the place bringing people together to then accelerate wider impact in the Andean region. So you probably know what shape the Andean mountains are better than me. Would you like to take a color to draw the Andean mountains?
So here's my...
And the camera's here, so just to bear in mind that our audiences and viewers are going to be looking that way. So
okay, so I'm going to just give it a go. So let's say this is more or less Central America, and then you get more or less, this is South America, right?
Yep.
And then we have Ecuador, so I'm going to do it in red, like Impacto, right? Mm-hmm. And then, thank you, there's water. And then we're going to put the Andean mountains here, right? These are the Andes, these beautiful snow-capped mountains. Mm-hmm. You will find the Amazon here. And then, of course, you have the... Oh, thank you. There's some beautiful trees, so I'll let you help me with that. So here's Ecuador, and I have a terrible... here's Impacto, and where we have 4 branches. So later in this year, we're going to reach someone else, a whole other team of, community of change makers here. But there are emerging cities everywhere in Latin America. And the way we see change happening is that we have now finished systematizing our model, and we want to be able to scale everywhere. We want to be able to scale to Peru and to Bolivia and maybe to Chile, and then to the north of Colombia and to the south of Colombia, because there are emerging cities like Quito, where a lot of entrepreneurs have fallen through the cracks. They're not in the big markets like Mexico or Brazil, but they have an equal potential to make a change.
And what do you say when you're scaling this idea of co-working spaces? Because there are a lot of other people who are playing in this space. What makes it unique about your model that you think works and has enabled you to create such successful businesses in Ecuador?
Well, I think that's because we have a very clear understanding of the problem we're solving. We're not solving the problem of lack of office. Office space, anyone can really do. Anyone with, the funding and maybe like a nice designer. We have the clarity that our spaces are community building spaces. We think of ourselves as urban interventions that allow people to, again, feel less lonely and have less transactional relationships and more profound collaborations.
Talk to me more about the change between transactional relationships and collaborative relationships, because I think it's a really interesting one.
I think that in order to really truly build a community, you need to trust the people that are around you. So, sharing an office space is like sharing a house. You wouldn't want to live with a roommate that doesn't share your values. If you're a deeply religious person, maybe you want someone who has the same values as you, or whatever. So we've chosen to start from what are the values that we share.
And what are they?
The values that we share are definitely around sustainability and social change and transformation.
Transformation?
Transformation in the sense of like that we're audacious enough to think that from these spaces we can transform the entire economy, that we are the next generation of entrepreneurs, the new business people, and we no longer driven only by profit. Of course, profit is nice and we really like profit, but we're not driven just by that. And that somehow breaks barriers and makes you feel like you can leave your computer wide open next to this random person that you don't know, and you have enough trust that like whatever that person finds, it would be better for the community.
That's fantastic. And we just have a question from Haluk Aykul, who asks and says, what an excellent initiative. And they want to know, what is your biggest challenge to move forward? Thank you very much, Haluk. Thank you, Haluk.
Thank you. We discussed this a little bit earlier, and I would love to say that I coined the term, but it's this, we are in the business of building ecosystems, right? And ecosystems can be either like a jungle or maybe like a nice permaculture garden and maybe a farm, right?
Okay.
The way Latin American countries have grown, and I think a lot of African countries as well, the way they've developed, there's these like public policies that want to run entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems the way they run everything else, like a farm. In a farm, you have to water the plants, and so you bring in the watering people and maybe the seeds and the farmer. But if the farmer gets sick, the farm is over. If the water irrigation system breaks down, the whole thing is over. If the seeds, for whatever reason, were not the right kind of seeds, it breaks down. And what I feel is that we, what's the biggest obstacle is that people don't understand that in order to be truly resilient, we need to build ourselves like a jungle. Because in a jungle, when a tree falls down, all the other little creatures start making the best out of that falling tree trunk and learning from it and failing forward, right?
A more resilient structure.
Exactly.
So it does have setbacks, but it's able to bounce back from those setbacks.
Right.
And what are the kind of setbacks, the sort of challenges that your entrepreneurs are tackling on a daily basis?
So I think that there's definitely a lot of the emotional, the constant feeling like you're not enough, like you can't really make it. So that's we really do deal with a lot of that through mentorship and through community. But then there's also the more technical skills. We find that there's a lot of incredible entrepreneurs that will probably never make it to Skoll because they don't speak English. Right? So we do need to either bring all these English-speaking, wonderful, potential impact investors to Ecuador to speak to us in our terms, or we need to teach these people English, or we need to just find a bridge where we can somehow get people to meet in the middle. And of
course, you're also getting some local funding, which is really exciting.
Which is wonderful. So we are building that bridge little by little. And then, of course, then there's the challenges that are more around context. I think that the way social entrepreneurship has grown in Latin America has meant that now, if we were like thinking of a funnel, right? You have the people that are really starting, there's lots, and then they fail, and then there's the people in the middle. And then there's the people that really make it big. And right now the funnel is really stuck with a lot of people in the middle that want to make it big. But there's this middle missing of finance. They're too big for microcredit. Yeah, but they're way too small for being attractive to a large impact investment fund. So one of the hardest pieces of news that I have to give entrepreneurs is saying, hey, you're selling 200,000 a year. That's fantastic, but you need to make it to $1 million before I ever introduce you to XYZ impact investor, because they're not interested in small scale ventures.
Fascinating stuff. And thank you so much, Haluk, for that great question.
I hope that was useful.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Well, I'm so grateful to have the time, and I think our picture here really shows your plan to colonize the whole of South America with your fantastic, innovative, collaborative workspaces, which also you working all with women and you really working with young people. You believe in that power. I wish we had more time to discuss because there's so much what you have to say that is just fascinating. Thank you, Michelle Arevalo-Carpenter. And coming up in 1 hour 40 minutes, we have Elizabeth Hausler, who's CEO of Build Change. Look forward to seeing you there.